Oh, it's a happy Monday, everyone, and welcome to my show where it really is okay to not be okay. I'm Rae Bonney, a qualified counsellor, workplace mental health specialist, and not to mention a very dedicated and oftentimes enthusiastically disruptive men's issues advocate. Not every girl's dream job, but hey, remember, men also matter. As always, I'm unwrapping one of the greatest gifts going around, and that is people. Layer by layer, we explore the thoughts and experiences, achievements and challenges of ordinary people bound to inspire the best you. At the same time, acknowledging that it really is okay to not be okay. Yesterday was Mother's Day, and I was down for the first round of the AFL Victoria Beyond Blue round and spoke to the people at Sandringham Zebras Football Club around this very topic, that it really is okay to not be okay. Remembering it's not always a great day for many mothers and fathers who for many reasons are unable to be with their children. So a big shout out for those people who probably stayed indoors yesterday and felt many different things. Anyway, my guest today has also had her very own well-publicised experience raising her children here in Australia. Jacqui Lambie has always stood out from the mediocrity of Australian politicians, even in the announcement of her exit from the Senate after being caught up in the ridiculous citizenship crisis, dare I say that. Her no-nonsense response that politicians who unwittingly breached Section 44 of the Constitution should just suck it up, deal with their fate and run for Parliament again is typical of her approach that endears Jacqui to so many. During her time in Parliament, Jacqui has been a somewhat refreshing and authentic Australian voice in the Senate. Love her or otherwise, you can't deny Jacqui is a fair dinkum, hands down, real deal, as she continues to stand steadfast for matters that include a better deal for our military veterans and a sustainable system of care for those affected by the scourge of ice addiction. Jacqui's joining me today on the line all the way from somewhere in Tasmania to talk about these matters and share some very enticing tidbits from her brand new warts and all autobiography, Rebel with a Cause. Welcome to the show, Jacqui.
Yeah, thank you for having me on.
How's that for an intro?
That's pretty good. That's damn good.
Have you got anything else to say?
No, not really. I'm recruiting for the Jacqui Lambie network, mate. I've got you right on time, I can tell you.
I'm right there, Jacqui. I do love a bit of Tasmania.
You can keep going longer than what I do.
Now, we met last year in Ulverston West, where you were raised in Ulverston, weren't you, in Tasmania?
Yeah, I was born in Ulverston, and I moved about 10 minutes down the road from there. So it's around that Central Coast area. Yep.
Is everything a bit 10 minutes down the road in Tasmania, Jacqui?
Yeah, pretty much, mate. Yeah, you know, if we go from one side of the island to the next, we like to take a packed lunch, but it only takes us about 4 hours to get there. You know, we're still engaged about 20 years ago before we had, you know, freeways or highways. Well, we have highways down here, but
yes.
You know, some people, I have to laugh, some people in the south have not even been up this way to see this side of to the top of Tasmania. You know, it makes
well, it's a bloody
laugh.
Shame, because it's absolutely beautiful. Now, we did meet at the Rotary Club of Ulverston annual Beyond Blue Gala dinner, and we have to give, before we start anything, Jacqui, a shout out to the divine Lindsay Morgan, who is the Mayor of Tasmania pretty much. And Lindsay organised, as he does every year, the annual Beyond Blue Gala dinner, and I was invited as a guest speaker, and so were you. And you went on before me, and you talked about an excerpt from your brand new book, Rebel Without a Cause. Oh, sorry, Rebel with a Cause, sorry.
You're making me look more rebellious than ever, sweetie.
But do you really need one? And I thought, far out, this is a bit of a tough act to follow, but I think we did all right.
Yeah, no, I think we did well, and we raised some money down there. That's the main thing, isn't it? It's all about charity and making sure that we get the awareness and charity.
Yeah, I'd bloody contest you on that, though. It's not about the money at all. I think all the money in the world you throw at this stuff, Absolutely, it doesn't do it does do something, but not, in terms of raising awareness and opening up these discussions, these authentic conversations. Money's not enough.
It's bizarre, isn't it? No, it's all about the awareness and making people talk. I mean, here's you and I. We can talk for hours on end. We don't need any coaxing, darling.
We had a shot about 7:30 this morning, and you said, Ray, we just got to get off the phone before we do the whole show, before we even get there.
We could have done a breakfast show. We could have doubled up for the day.
Now, you and Lindsay Morgan, who we just mentioned, are somewhat related, aren't you?
Yes, I think so. We're all bloody related down here, sweetheart.
Yep.
So it's pick and choose.
Yeah.
That's how I get my numbers to seats. You see, it's pretty easy. I do have relations. I have to cheat.
Well, that's not so bad. But your book's getting quite a bit of press because it's not what everyone expects. Everyone's expecting this, bit of a slag on Australian politics, but it has nothing to do with that at all. It's your warts and all autobiography.
Yeah, I think people tend to forget that I was only sort of in there for 3 years. I don't have a 20 or 25-year experience. I don't, I couldn't tell you everything that goes on in Parliament, especially being an independent too. You tend to keep to yourself. You don't go to their
Jacqui, I don't believe that for a moment that you've kept to yourself. You're a household name.
Oh, yeah, no, in that way. But when you're inside Parliament, you don't tend to go and have drinks with the other opposite sides or anything. If you do any wheeling and dealing, it's all done during the day and over deals and things like that. So you're just a bit... So I don't get involved, so I don't hear anything that's going on.
Yeah.
So I found that quite difficult. It's the same thing when they asked me about Barnaby Joyce. I'm like, well... I didn't know anything about bonking going on up there. I'm miles out of it, darling. I'm miles out of it.
I know. If only you knew it was so easy, Jacqui, you probably would have taken some for yourself.
I know, and I'm thinking, God, it's been nearly 15 years for me, and I'm seriously thinking about I'm going to have to bring in the plumber before I even go to, stage one. My God.
We are going to get onto that later on in the show, but you are well known for getting into the faces of the political left as well, especially in appearances on The Project and Tony Jones's Q&A. And I was watching a bit this morning about that shouting match you had with the Youth Without Borders founder Yasmin Abdel about supporters of Sharia law and how they should be deported from Australia. Can you tell us about what that was really like? Because Tony Jones looked a little bit uncomfortable and you were both going at it like anything.
Yeah, I think it was a bit uncomfortable. I think when you go back over that I probably, as an adult, could have handled that probably a little bit better. It didn't need to turn into a shouting match, so I don't think neither of us come out on top out of that interview, so that was really unfortunate.
Have you changed your views at all, though, in terms of what she was saying?
Well, my view is that I think my view is very straight down the line. There's one law in this country, and it's Australian law. So we already know. I mean, it's been well documented that there's already shadows of Sharia law in Sydney, in Western Sydney, and spreading out in the Melbourne city. So I have a problem with that. My problem is there is one law, and I don't care whether you call it Sharia law or Sharia law or whatever other law you want to call it. It doesn't matter to me, because what matters to me is that it's Australian law, and that's why if you want to come here and live, and you're living here already, then you should be abiding by those laws. It's simple.
Yep, true. And, I mean, you have a lot of people backing you on that as well. And I think
we don't need to make it complicated, and I think you bring in all these academics and things like that and just say, well, it's pretty simple to me. There's one law in this country. I love my country. I didn't serve for 10 years, to be questioned on whether I follow the law of Australia or not, and I do. So that's
and I think that's a point that you made after that conversation as well, that it wasn't really about religion. What was your point? It was about the law.
Yeah, it was about the law. We have one law, and Australian law, and we all should abide by that and follow it. That way it's not complicated.
Yes.
Here's the law. This is what we follow. We don't need to bring anything else in. It works quite fine. It doesn't work all the time, but most people seem to be able to abide by that. We're used to that. We're setting in our ways. That's all.
That's right. Well, of course, there was the other conversation you had with the Indigenous songwriter Dan Sultan, and the Attorney General George Brandis also got involved around the date of Australia Day, which is still in high contention. And I personally don't even know where I sit with it, so I thought I'm going to bring in my mate Jacqui. And
I struggle with this because we all go through tough times in life, but we've got to move on from the past. If that is hurting us, we need to find deep within ourselves, is that the real reason, or is that just the tip of the iceberg? And I I think it's like me going through the stuff that I went through with Veterans Affairs for 10 years. I could hold that hatred inside of me forever and ever, but I'll never heal properly. And I'll become toxic, and I don't want to be like that. And it destroys me when I look at these young Indigenous kids out there blaming the whites for everything. And I say, hey, that happened many, many years ago. Why don't we look deep inside and find the real reason you have so much hatred within you?
Yeah.
You know, and I just think it's really easy to just blame something. So, well, if we change Australia Day, do you think that's going to make one of us Indigenous people feel any bloody different? I'll tell you what'll make me feel different and what'll make me happy is when we start closing the gap. That's what'll make a difference. But right now, it is not going to make a difference if we move Australia Day, and we're wasting a lot of energy in an area that's not going to change the living conditions or the conditions of those Indigenous people that are living in this country.
No, I absolutely agree, Jacqui. And I was speaking at the Male Suicide Prevention Conference last year up in New South Wales, and you know, one of those settings that we address with a lot of passion is Indigenous suicide, especially male suicide. And, you know, one of the guys got up, one of the Indigenous guys, and it made so much sense. He said, you know, it's like, you know, we were given a watch and you put the watch on the table and you smash it. And then a whole other culture goes through the ranks, you know, years and years of generations of Indigenous people. And then you're given the same watch back and told how to fix it. And we've got no idea who we used to be, let alone who we are now. To fix it, everybody needs to be involved in fixing these issues.
Yeah, and you've got to stop blaming the past. What you've got to do is put all that energy into, well, what's going to change it for the better in the future? Because that's what we need to be doing.
Yeah. Is that still high on one of your issues that you tackle?
Well, mine, obviously, I've always sat with the belief that if we had dedicated Indigenous seats in Parliament, then those people all they would have to worry about doing is make sure that they're delivering what needs to be delivered to the Indigenous people, and that every cent is going all the way down to the bottom. This is the problem. By the time it gets down to these lower groups in these Indigenous areas, and there are hundreds of them, by the time we go through the middleman and everyone else in between, there's bugger all money left.
Yeah. Well, how many Indigenous people are occupying seats in Parliament?
I think there was 5 of us. But the whole thing is, you've got to remember, these are not independents. These are not, so if you're a dedicated Indigenous seat, it's because you're in there and you're working for the Indigenous people.
Yes.
You know, you still have to take votes on other things, but the whole thing is, if your party, you've still got to vote around the party line. So when you've got people like Dobson, and I love him to death, and the other Indigenous, Malinguri in there, and people like that, and they're out there fighting in the background behind closed doors, but unfortunately it still comes down to the party decision in the end, even though these guys probably know what's more than likely going to fix it and what doesn't, but they're still not getting listened to. And unfortunately that's the setup of the big parties. That's the way it is.
Is that something that kept you from being involved in the popular parties?
Yeah, well, I think that I am quite independent. Look, I can work within a party group. I was in the army for 10 years. Being part of a group's not an issue. Is taking orders from idiots that I can't handle. That's my biggest problem.
Who's an idiot, Jacqui? Call one out. Go on.
No, I'm just saying, you know,
not
when
me.
You've got people leading you, which are not, if they're not helping you, or you really don't have, probably more so say it like this, if you don't have full respect for them, then that makes things really, really difficult. And respect can't be earned because you're just given a seat in a major party. It just can't be earned like that. People have got to be able to earn that. So for me, people around me, those people that have got close to me over the last 3 or 4 years, not because I let them in, it's because they had to earn their way in.
Yes.
And that's the way it should be, because that brings on trust and loyalty. And that's what the country is missing.
Yes.
You know.
Well, you're pretty vocal about your, I was going to say disdain, but you didn't really hold hands with Tony Abbott that much, did you?
No, I didn't, and because I don't like his leadership style.
Yeah, well,
you know,
can you describe that? What that means?
I think his leadership style is just too hardcore and just too right-sided. You know, you've got to find a little bit of middle ground in all this, because you have to keep most Australians together. And I think sometimes when you're really hard, you can bring, you know, out in the street, you can put pressure with people out in the street, so you can bring riots on and things like that. And I think Tony Abbott just sat right on a borderline of upsetting small minority groups, and he didn't need to do it the way he did it. But you know, and I expect these people should know better. Okay, I'm trying to still find my way through it after 2 or 3 years. Tony Abbott's done, over 20 years in there. He should know better. But bringing division out there on the streets, because you're too hardcore one side, is never going to help the country whatsoever.
Well, in your opinion, why do we keep electing, again, I don't have a necessary opinion on this. I don't have an opinion on anything. But why do we keep electing these kinds of people into our major leadership roles when there's people like you and many others like you who are really, really batting for legitimate causes that are affecting, our day-to-day?
Yeah, I think money. Money's the big one,
Because you're asking too much, are you, Jacqui?
No. I think...
That was a joke.
No, you might have a point there. Hang on. No.
Ka-ching.
No, I just think that, it costs a lot of money. That's what we're doing now. Instead of being publicly funded like the UK and other countries around to make it more fair playing field, is that, some people... There are a lot of Australians out there that couldn't mention any more than half a dozen politicians that, out in one interview that say, well, name half a dozen politicians. They couldn't do it because most of them have not earned their seats. They've come up through the political machinery, and what they've done is they've bought their seats because they've spent millions bloody winning them. That's what they've done.
Yeah.
So this doing it from the grassroots up, and I don't have a definite answer, but I think doing public funding for elections would be a much better would be much better for the rest of the country. And the other thing is, then you wouldn't have the corruption either, because I tell you what, there's big money coming from unions, you've got big money coming from big business, all that sort of stuff. So who's actually truly earning their seat with their electorates? Are they just buying them? Because it all comes down to power. That's all they care about up there is power. As long as I've got the numbers to say, well, if I want to do something that's done, then that's going to be done.
Yes.
It's not about debate anymore in the country. It's about who has the most power so I can get my legislation through, even though it's crappy and even though I won't listen to whether it's the majors or the miners or the independents up there, and even though they've got some smart ideas, I'm still not going to put it in the bill.
Well,
this is what it all comes down to. It's all about power, and it's disgusting.
But when you're talking about them up there, Jacqui, do you think that places like Tasmania are often forgotten about? And I remember, the demise of guns down in Tasmania, which really, really affected everybody down there. You talk about money and power. Were you guys protected in that demise?
No. So when guns went down, oh goodness, no. I can tell you now, in the last 2 years, it's nice to see log trucks back on the road. That's how long it took. So we had the Green Labour Alliance, which was not forestry friendly, let's be honest. So that was really, really difficult. I watched suicides in my own backyard going on over that 3 or 4 years. It was just awful. No one had money. It was shattering. So it's nice to see, as much as visitors sometimes don't like to see it, when we're sitting here in Burnie and we can see wood piles, wood chips on our wharfs, and we know things are doing pretty well. When they're chock-a-block and you see those log trucks out in the road, just seems to be a bit more brightness around.
Oh, well, I was down in Deloraine the weekend before last and speaking at the Deloraine Football Club, and, there was barely a conversation I had with a person who hadn't been touched by suicide. And that's, it's fantastic that you guys talk about it, but geez.
Yeah, but you know what, they're struggling in all these rural and regional areas.
Yeah.
They really are. There's the jobs aren't there like they used to. We don't have the manufacturing. We've got bloody ice epidemics out there everywhere. Yeah. And these kids are really feeling it. They've got very little leadership in politics. They don't know where the country's going. They've got no idea what they're going. Like many years ago, we used to say, well, we're going to go and work here, and that's where we spend our time. These guys don't have that structure in their lives. No. And that's really unfortunate.
Now, the ice epidemic, as we call it, is something that's quite close to your heart as well, given that your son also had an experience of ice addiction, and it's one of your Jacqui Lambie issues that you deal with. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so obviously the ice, the purity of the ice, I'm not sure if you know this, but it's gone from 5% to about 90% in 2 years. It's got cheaper out in the streets as well. They're mixing it in marijuana bags. They're being able to, slice it up that much that you don't even know. So it is a problem, the ice. My son's one of the lucky ones. My son's now been clean for 2.5 years. It'll be coming up to 3 years in October. But he ended up spending 18 months in rehab. I just sort of coaxed him out in the end. He was getting a bit settled in there. I said, mate, you've got to come out and transition back into real life. That was starting to become a bit of a comfort zone. But he's held down a full-time job now for just over 12 months.
Yep.
He's doing great guns in that. And he informed me that he got, and I don't think anyone else knows this, I'm sure he won't mind me telling you since I had to go and tell Mum and Dad yesterday, but he got engaged last week.
Oh.
So God love him.
Well, congratulations.
Yeah. I did ask the second question, is there a baby on the way?
I was going to say, you're going to be a grandmother.
No, apparently not. Sometimes I like to break that sort of news just slightly as we're going along, but
No. Jacqui, you don't want to be a grandmother yet. Yeah.
No, I certainly don't. I don't want him to be a father. He's probably a bit young, and he needs to get sort his life out and put a deposit on the house and all that sort of stuff.
But seriously, that's such a great outcome because so many just do not get out of that cycle.
No, and it is really, really heartbreaking. But it's not just so heartbreaking for the child. It's heartbreaking for the family because what it does to that family unit. Because you think as a mother, you think you're doing the right thing by not kicking them out and things like that. While you're putting the rest of you and your family members under risk, and that's the truth of it. But you cut in a world where you say, if I kick my son out, it might be someone else he hurts instead of somebody hurts in this house. That is what we're up against.
Yes,
because this stuff is wicked.
Oh.
This stuff made my son an animal. I've never seen anything like it. He was like in kill zone at times when you looked into his eyes. It's the most awful thing. I'll never forget it.
Yeah.
Oh. So it has a lot. It can just ruin a family unit. It's the most amazing thing. And the other thing is we do not have the rehabilitation centres around Australia. No. People are still only getting 2 weeks. 2 weeks for ICE is not enough. No. These guys need to be cleaned up. They need 6 months, and that's minimum. That's on a good day.
Well, yeah. Well, something else that's really close to your heart, which often has outcomes like many addiction or substance abuse issues, is the military. And when we're looking at post-traumatic stress, I don't like to call it a disorder, but many do. How does that feed into all of these issues as well, Jacqui? And, even your own experience of having a physical injury in the military that wasn't taken care of, and that for you even led to abuse issues.
Yeah, I think the hardest thing is with the military is the transition. It's not so much the PTSD.
Sorry, when you say transition, I just laugh inside my own head. Because is there one?
They've got to be able to transition. So they need to be able to transition out of military life. Yeah. Now, if you can make a soldier in 12 weeks, and you can if you go through Kapooka training, the difference in yourself from day one within a 12-week period is amazing. Yet we can't seem to be able to transition these guys from the military back in the civilian world.
But often these people are coming from very, very senior positions of authority, and then when you come out, you're nobody.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. You're really, really hyped up when you're in there, and it's the psychology that they put in your head's quite amazing. So basically, and please, your civilians don't take this the wrong way, it's just the way that they build your psyche. But they'll tell you that civilians are second-class citizens. They'll tell you that you are a first-class citizen ahead of a civilian. But they need to do all this because they're building you up ready for war. Yeah. So you get a lot of that psycho babble to put in your head, and then when you realise, when you come out in the real world and you think, oh my God, I put my life on the line, I have so many skill sets, yet nobody wants to employ me on the outside. It's a real kick in the guts. So not only are you carrying your physical and psychological injuries, you've just basically got another bitch slap. That's how I put it. You've got another bitch slap because people don't want to employ you. The other thing with the military, so even though we were talking about this in the early 90s, I still have not done it, is that any qualifications that you get in the military should be changed over and equivalent to the ones you get in the civilian world.
Absolutely.
And they're only just starting doing this now to a certain degree. And I can tell you they're not going at 100%.
No, I was going to say when you say a certain degree, it's a very small degree.
Yeah. So that's
not even a degree.
That's a real worry. So you're not this special person anymore where you thought you were great, you were giving your country your whole life. Now you're fighting to survive again. You're fighting to survive on the outside. This is a whole new. So it's not just that you're fighting the enemy anymore. You've got to actually be able to change that over, and those coping mechanisms that you've used in the military, you now need to adapt them over to civilian. Yeah. And they're really struggling with that sort of stuff. The other thing is, and like you said, men. Jesus, I could sometimes put a boot fair up their clacker. Ooh. Please come and ask for help. Ray. It's
but
so
they do, Jacqui. They just don't have a safe. They just don't have a safe space to do it.
once they get to me and I can sit across, I can pick them up within a minute. Say, righto, do you want to?
There's a business for us.
Where you just sort of break and say, I already know what you're going through. You've got PTSD, and I'm not even a doctor. I can pick up those signs. I can see it in their shaking. I can see their eyes. I can see their aggression.
Yeah.
I've lived this and breathed it now for 17 years, and I went through it myself. Not the PTSD, but I had major depression, and I've got best friends of mine that got a PTSD because of their military service, and it's just really, really difficult. But if you can keep them distracted, if we can get them into that civilian employment and keep them distracted, it lessens the effects, and they can move on with their lives a little bit better. Yeah, that first couple of years they may need a day off here and there.
Well, like anybody
with treatment.
But you know what? Somebody's just texted me, a friend of mine who knows me very well, to say, hey, you're agreeing a lot with Jacqui Lambie, as that was a surprise. He just doesn't know what awesome friends we are. But some good questions. Maybe you should run for Parliament, not in a heartbeat. But I will contest you on something. Whilst we're on the subject of post-traumatic stress in the military, I was talking to one of my other peers the other day about the gold card contention. And for those people that don't know what the gold card is, it's basically carte blanche on medical attention when you come out of the military. So you basically have free access to medical intervention. Is that right, Jacqui?
Yeah, that's correct.
So my thoughts as a practitioner and a therapist are, you give somebody free rein on anything, and potentially that's going to have effects itself that aren't great to the human condition. So we're seeing a lot of these people who are accessing healthcare with the gold card being unnecessarily diagnosed and prescribed because of the high touch arrangement with the gold card, and that does lead to disabling people more rather than enabling.
Oh, it's no different to if you're in a relationship and someone's mentally ill and you're feeding them and you're kissing their butt all the time. It'll have the same effect. I don't see a lot of this going on.
I don't think anyone does that, Jacqui. I don't think there's a lot of butt kissing.
I think you don't mean to. Do you know what I mean? But it's just that TLC stuff, and you think you're doing the right thing. It's like a drug addict. You think you're doing the right thing by telling your son everything's okay, and you keep them at home the day in, day out, and they're raising a knife at you. It's not okay.
Yeah.
It's the same sort of thing. First of all, a gold card is extremely hard to get, and they're still very, very hard to get. There isn't a great deal of people out there with gold cards, especially the new ones back from the Middle East. You've still got a lot of those Vietnam veterans, what is left of them, and I say what is left of them kindly, because they are dying off at a large rate.
And when you say they're dying off, would you say suicide? Or age?
No, this is just their age and just what they've been through, their military service from Vietnam, the PTSD, all that, the excessive alcohol, that sort of thing. They're really paying the price for that, and we already knew that. I think that their life expectancy is about 7 years lower than the normal Australian, something like that. But I did do one thing, and I think this is where it offsets what you're saying, is that I fought really hard for everyone to get, for all the military people to make sure that they didn't have to beg and borrow for physical and for psychological care, whether it's for drug abuse, whether it's for mental illness, or for their families if they needed them. Now, I think that has saved lives. All right, that's now been enacted since July, not last year, year before. A lot of people now, that momentum, everyone's getting on that gold card.
Yeah.
But what it does save you doing is begging and borrowing to see a psychiatrist, or knowing that DVA, until they give you the approval, you may be paying that bill. You don't have $200 a fortnight to see a psychologist if you're fighting DVA. So I can see what you mean about having...
but DVA, and for the untrained ear, that's the Department of Veteran Affairs. I mean, I say this, again, pretty loosely, biggest killers of people. Is that unfair?
No, not at all. We call them, it's called delay, deny, die. That's their nickname for us, the Department of Veterans Affairs, because they'll delay every claim that they possibly can. Then they'll deny you. This is year in, year out. And then basically by the time you've done that for 8, 9, 10 years, you're probably going to end up trying to take your own life. And that's where a lot of us end up. And there's no need to put us through that in the first place.
Oh, absolutely not. And I want to lead into something else, because we've gone through more than half of the show already, but this is relevant as well. We were talking about medicinal cannabis this morning, which is one of your other issues that you bat for as well, which feeds into some of the PTS symptoms where people are getting a lot of relief using medicinal cannabis, as opposed to some of the other mood stabilisers that often lead to suicide, which a lot of people do not know about. So tell us about your work around legalising medicinal cannabis.
Yeah, so my thought is about legalising medicinal cannabis is pretty simple. I can tell you now, it does not have the effects that morphine does. It does not have the effects on you that antipsychotics do. And my big call is on it. The only reason that it hasn't been legalised is because not enough money in pharmaceutical companies. You know how much money they're making out of the morphine opium trade?
No.
So you can imagine losing money there, because it just seems quite bizarre, isn't it? That's a real call for it, but no pharmaceuticals getting out there pushing it through as quickly as possible. I just find that bizarre.
Well, I think the pharmaceutical industry has always had a lot to answer for in the way it peddles drugs.
It's all about cash. Yeah, it's all about cash and shareholders. That is what it is about.
But I've never really heard much about the withholding of really legitimate therapeutic drugs like medicinal cannabis.
I just think you can imagine the money, the billions of dollars in opium compared to the money in medicinal cannabis.
Well, it's a bit contradictory, isn't it? We just sort of legalise the exportation of our beautiful drug to the world to manufacture, but we're not manufacturing it here ourselves.
It is only the politicians that are stopping this from being legally and easily available through your own GP, I can tell you now. And it's not the Greens, and it's not me, and it's not the crossbenchers.
Is it ironic that it's the Greens?
Oh, no, it's not the Greens. I mean, they're pushing for medicinal cannabis, sorry, yeah.
You see, that would go hand in hand, yeah.
Yeah. So, so that's not really an issue. But, look, there's a group of veterans out there. They call themselves the Wounded Warriors, or Weeder Warriors, Weeder Warriors.
Yeah, I had a look at them online today when you told me about them. Yes, I'm going to join up with them. I'm going to get them on the show.
Good on you. Yeah, they'll love that. Good on them. And but that's stopping them from being on antipsychotics or morphine, because there's a couple of them that really suffer that pain. So it just takes the edge off. That's all they want. They'll fight the rest themselves.
Yes, and even cancer. I was looking at some people that have been having diagnosis of cancer that are using medicinal cannabis, not only just for physical relief, but also cure.
Yeah, I don't know about the cure bit, but I certainly, from the evidence and the people that I've spoken to over the years, and that certainly, it doesn't fix the pain and it doesn't fix you psychologically. It just takes that edge off. And I would rather them be having a little bit of cannabis oil or medicinal cannabis oil than having morphine or antipsychotics chucked down their throat, because I can tell you now, take it from somebody that took those antipsychotics year in, year out, made me nuts. So... so I'm really against that morphine stuff and antipsychotics. I've been there, done that.
Yeah. And Jacqui Lambie, for those of you who've never heard of her and have been living under a bushel for your whole life, she was raised in public housing in Devonport. She served 10 years in the Australian Army before injury forced her out of uniform. That says something, doesn't it? She was elected as a senator for Tasmania at the 2013 federal election, representing the Palmer United Party. Her term began in July 2014. In 2014, that very same year, she resigned from Clive Palmer's party to sit in the Senate as an independent. And from then on, we'll make that up as we go, Jacqui. Welcome back.
We will.
So you got out of your uniform, did you?
I did get out of that uniform, darling. Yes.
Well, that leads us to the next conversation, which is all about your love life. Now, I did catch up with the divine Ken Lyons, who is coming on with his show Here's Health in the next hour. And Ken and I were recently, last year in fact, at the Variety fundraiser for donating bicycles to children. And the person who was donating those bicycles was the one and only Senator Darren Hinch. And we got chatting to Darren, and he mentioned a little date that you and he went out on.
Yes, we did go out on a date, actually.
Yes.
It was the first parliamentary ball, and it was really bizarre because my dad was going to take me, and my dad he was sick or something, and Darren rang me the week before, and we were having a talk, and I was having a real bitch, I'll be honest with you, about my dad, and that I'd have to go by myself and blah, blah, blah. So he just said, well, I'll take you to the parliamentary ball then. And I thought that was very sweet of him. So, but someone told me he was ringing to ask me to go anyway. So.
Well, you made a pretty striking pair because you had this red number on.
Yeah, we worked it all out. They said, what are you wearing? So it was all done behind the scenes. This is what I'll be wearing. And so he went and brought his, because he usually wears a scarf, and said, well, I'll get the same red as that. Yes, it was all coloured up and pretty.
Well, if you are speaking to Darren at that very variety event that Ken and I was at, Darren did agree to come on my show here, and I've heard hide nor hair of him since. So if you can pull your romantic strings onto Darren and get him in here, you could come in together.
You might get longer than 30 seconds out of him sweating. I'll let him know.
Now, you're also seen down at KFC with 6 chicken nuggets with another parliamentarian.
It was a hot and spicy night that night.
Now, the press did report on that too, Jacqui. What, Nick Xenophon?
Yeah.
What was all that about?
Nick was down here actually. It was for the 2016 election, and he had some candidates running down here. Unfortunately, when you come down here on a Tuesday night on the northwest coast, unless you're going to have McDonald's, Hungry Jack's or Kentucky Fried Chicken, at 9:30 at night you're not going to find anything else. So anyway, we had Nick all bailed up, and this thing went for ages, and he was going to pick up the bill, and he was all taking us out for a can of meal, and anyway, he got out of it nice and cheap, and he had to go and buy us Kentucky Fried Chicken, so there was a couple of staffers and myself and Nick.
Well, he did fire back a bit in the media, but he was also very complimentary about you as well.
Oh, yeah, no.
It's really nice.
He's a really good bloke, Nick is. I'm pretty devastated he didn't do as well as what he probably should have done over in South Australia. I think, that would have been a bit hard to take over 20 years of giving South Australia everything, and then, so anyway, I'm sure we'll see Nick out in about 4 months longer.
Well, but since November, and now was your dad kind of had something to do with you losing your job, so I'm surprised that you're still talking to him.
He's making up for it, trust me. He's about to put Jacqui Lambie all over his car.
Well, you said that this morning.
You
said you were going out with your dad today, getting back out into it, and which I thought, was an interesting conversation for us to be having, that it's not always what it looks like, is it? And, since you've been spending a bit of time in the media with your book, which we'll talk about before we wrap up the show, but also getting out there and continuing your work in lobbying and getting the word out there about the issues that you campaign for. But what is that like sometimes when you just don't want to get out of bed?
Sometimes it can be really, really difficult. Sometimes you have to push yourself, and I think that's where my mum and dad can, because I see them a fair bit or talk to them, they can pick up on that sort of thing, to them saying, oh, what are you doing? You're getting back out there tomorrow, and you're like, oh, yeah. Well, what are you doing? And, sometimes, because they're both semi-retired, they go, well, let's go for a drive and let's go up here and have coffee and go and talk to these people, or if they can sort of pick up on that a little bit, because it is a lot, it could be 12 months for me to sit on the sidelines and just worry about, well, how am I going to pay my bills in between? So you've got that as well, and
yeah, because when you finished up, you just had a week's pay, didn't you?
Yeah, so I had a week's pay. So I was just saying to, been sort of telling people, it's quite funny because I ran through the state election. I didn't work because we're already felt the pinch of me losing the seat, and then I'd already had state candidates out there running before that. So we couldn't pull out. So I just, I never come into Parliament with any money, and I sure as hell, by the time I got through that, I think it was only about 6-7 weeks ago, I had $1,000 in my bank, and I thought, better go and find some work, But I think the upside of that is when you do get a bit miserable, you think, well, you know what, we've got this problem, we've got a real homeless problem in Tasmania at the moment. We don't have the public housing for people like many other parts of Australia. So I think, when you sort of, you get to that point and you go, well, you know what, at least you've got a roof over your head, you can afford your bloody power bill, you get on with it, you've got some light work coming through. What are you actually worried about, girlfriend? You've been out to serve your country in uniform and in the Senate. You're going to have another strike. Then I think you're pretty much miles ahead of many millions of Australians out there that are really feeling the pinch right now. So I think, sometimes you've got to give yourself a bit of a bitch slap, to be honest, and remind yourself that things aren't near as bad as many others.
Do you think that's a true demonstration of resilience, though, Jacqui? Because we talk a lot about resilience, build some, get some more. But, you've been there before. Even in your book, Rebel with a Cause, you talk about the times where you couldn't feed your kids and, potentially homeless. But you've been there before, so you know what it feels like and you know what to do.
Yeah, and I think, so that's another thing. My kids are growing up, so I don't need to, if I've only got a couple of dollars, how am I going to get bread? I'm going to have to ring up someone and borrow $20 off them for a couple of days. So, I think when you look at all that, and to a point, even when I was fighting DBA, when I was at my worst, and, I couldn't even leave the house without having massive panic attacks and things like that. And I think sometimes you just got to remind yourself that you're a hell of a lot better off than what you were 7 or 8 years ago, and that of many, and a lot better off than millions of others. And there is millions of other Australians out there doing it bloody tough.
Oh,
so
well,
I think
yes,
that
but still, when your cup's full, Jacqui, it is full, and just because you may have experienced a certain kind of life, or it doesn't exclude you from needing or being deserving of help and care and kindness. And I'm wondering how people can help you with what you're doing. I mean, you're helping us bloody Australians. You're getting...
I think, you know what, Ray? It helps me when I get out there and I can do things for charity and I can help out there and do basic things, whether that's being down at Bunnings for Rotary and doing the barbecue. That's what helps me out, because it makes me feel like I'm doing something.
How do you even get a bloody gig on Bunnings? Like, we tried to get one here at the radio station. It took us a whole year.
I did it. I think they've set themselves in down here now. So most of the local clubs have got in with Bunnings, and they've all worked between themselves and Bunnings to make sure they're getting a day, a month or whatever. But good fundraising, $1,000 to $1,500 for 5.
It goes a long way,
hours.
Doesn't it? And when you look at the amount of money that's being pissed up against the wall in other areas, we won't name them, but that makes me so furious when I, being a men's issues advocate, and I look at, what little money can help one man stay alive for one day.
Yeah, I know.
Bugger all.
It's amazing, isn't it? It's like when and people say, well, when you're in Melbourne or whatever, don't give charity out to the people on the bloody streets or whatever. I'm sorry, but if I've got $5, $10, I'm giving it to them. It's up to them. If they go and spend that on alcohol, that's it. But you hope, you just sort of, a little bit inside of you says, I just hope, mate, you just go and get yourself a burger with that. You can't.
But you know what, Jacqui? Even if that person bought a hit of ice, and I shouldn't probably say this on radio, but if that very thing keeps a person alive to the next day where they might get the right kind of help, I don't care.
That's what I mean. And if that's what I mean. They
Packet
have a
of
choice
cigarettes.
between they want to go hit the bottle, or they can go and get themselves a burger, or, okay, hang on, we probably get a $5 bottle of wine, but we can also get a burger. Then at least I know they're still getting something bloody to eat. I mean, how else do you look at that? But I just think it's better off to give them $10 and not just walk past and ignore the plight.
Or even a smile. Even a smile. These people are human. And we were talking about this in Deloraine last week and yesterday in Sandringham. You don't know what it feels like being somebody else.
No, and it's a simple thing like you. So all you've got to do is walk up to someone if you're not sure and say, "G'day, mate. Are you okay?" Yeah. How's your day been? That minute or two that you can spend with those people can change their whole day.
Or could change your whole day, because you could spend half an hour bitching about your day.
Yeah.
I always say to people, you know what, in the supermarket, when the checkout person goes, "Oh, how was your day?" they don't expect an answer back. And I go, "I've got $200 worth of groceries to put through here, so you're going to hear it."
Yeah, nothing wrong with having a bit of a chat. I like to have a chat. I'm a chatty person, so I don't care who it's to. It's amazing what you learn.
Talking about chatting, before we wrap up the show, your book, where can people find it and buy it and read it?
Yeah, so you can buy those, I think, is it the e-readers? You can get them online. I think you can purchase a copy of the book for $16. Target's got it, and most of the bookshops are still selling it. So I do believe that Target just put it back on the shelf as well. So it's back out there.
No, and you look great. I really like the cover. And for all reports, if people are dubious about this book, have a read of the reviews. This is not a political diatribe. This is Jacqui Lambie's autobiography, which talks about her life and what it feels like being Jacqui, and I love that.
Yeah, I think it was more, I wanted people could sort of see me from a distance, but I don't think, they never really got the full story. So I wanted people to make up their own minds straight from the horse's mouth.
Yeah.
Right, and just to find who I am, the makeup, why I'm the person I am, you know, so they can understand me a little bit better, but also to understand, the big thing was obviously out there, the veterans, and what veterans, and not just veterans, but those sort of people that are go and get these compensation, for their injuries. And it's not just Department of Veterans Affairs. These insurance companies are absolutely disgusting in what they're doing to normal workers out there. They're getting just as bad. So this is becoming an epidemic, not just Department of Veterans Affairs and the way they're treating those that are injured and sick, but also on the civilian side of it as well.
Yeah, no, I think really, really good.
And I'm quite sure you hear about policing, the fireys, their compensation systems aren't any better.
No, first responders, it's a really, really big issue. And it's just one of these things we talk about a lot, but are we really doing anything? We're very blind to, going to sleep at night or getting up in the day, not recognising, organisations like the SES, the CFA, or whoever it might be, the police, military police, do every day. We're very ready to criticise, but, how do we help support these people better?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of the things that normal people, we don't see. So, people might say, it was just a car accident. But you know what, when you're looking at dead bodies and parts sitting in a car, and you're not doing that once or twice, and, you've got to see, the person may become somewhat desensitised to it, but I can tell you what, sooner or later in their life, those pictures that they've seen in their head, that they've seen with their eyes, will show up in their heads, and that is the way it is.
They don't.
That is what post-traumatic stress is all about. And, it may have been someone who was abused when they were younger. That's PTSD.
Yeah.
How do we help these people to overcome those psychological injuries that they've had in their lives?
Or just understand that, or believe these people.
Yeah.
One of my ex-boyfriends, I've got a lot of ex-boyfriends, Jacqui, they're all beautiful, but they don't.
Lucky you,
they don't stay.
I can't get one.
They don't stay a long time, But he
when you go 15 years without, you can come back to me and have a bit, sweetie. You've got to get some time up.
I'll send you a few of my tactics.
Yeah,
but look, he's very dear to me, and we're still very good friends. And he became a grade 1 nurse and ended up in Afghanistan a few years ago on the front line. And he came back, and he's the toughest guy. Like, he was called Frankie, as in Frankenstein, because he was known not to have any feelings. But he now lives very remotely in New South Wales, and he said to me one day, Rae, picked up more pieces of kids than you could ever imagine, and I just wasn't prepared for that. And he gets no support either. He's just happened to find a really nice little hospital in the outback which absolutely supports post-traumatic stress and allows him to have a job that he really loves. That's a really cool outcome.
Yeah, that's a good outcome. So what I mean, it's working from both sides. It's giving them something to distract them, something that he loves doing, and that makes it easy for him to deal with his PTSD.
Exactly.
Just makes it easy to manage.
Well, Jacqui, that's time up for us, because Ken Lyons is waiting in Prey in Studio 2 to push his buttons and push his own buttons to get his show going.
Don't let me stop a man from pushing his buttons, sweetie. I wouldn't want to stand in the way of that.
I think we'll take this conversation offline, but look, what a bloody pleasure it is having you on my show. It's been my highlight this week to talk to you, and especially bringing some of these really important issues into the limelight.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. And don't forget about those men's issues. I've got 250,000 on my social media, so if there's anything I can put up there for those to make that awareness out there, I have no problem in doing that.
Oh, didn't know it was 250,000. My maths isn't that great. It looked like...
Yeah, so please use me. It's pretty quiet at the moment, so if you've got issues to put out there about those men's issues, it's good. They share them. I've got plenty of men on the site, so
they do.
It's good.
Now,
it's
look,
about awareness.
Just before we go, just want to remind everyone, Jacqui, that, some of the things that we've spoken about today could bring up feelings for people that are uncomfortable. So if you do need to connect with something a little bit more highbrow than us, Lifeline is 131114. Suicide callback service 1300 659 467. Of course, 000 is not a hard one to remember. Take care, everyone. We'll see you next week.